interoperability, interchangeability, and joint. Those words are all there in describing exactly how the F-35, an international plane that Canada bought in from the beginning, that it characterized a hallmark of how defense cooperation between the U.S., Canada, and other countries really, really works well.
There needs to be more jobs created out of the F-35 contract. That's clear to me and clear to this government. And at the same time, we think that we can use military procurement to get more. And that is why we're looking indeed at the Gripen.
The Swedish delegation here in Canada this week to in part pitch Saab's Gripen fighter jet is now heading home, with the Fed still weighing whether to pull out of a planned purchase of dozens of American-made F-35s. The U.S. ambassador to Canada has been vocal about his support for the F-35 and hinted repeatedly at what Canada's decision could mean for future trade talks at a conference yesterday. Let's bring in the front bench to talk about that. Marco Mendicino, James Moore, and Peter Julian are back. Thank you all for your patience. I appreciate it. James, I'll start with you. I was at that talk that the ambassador gave yesterday, and every time he could say F-35, he did. He was being interviewed by the head of the Canadian manufacturers and exporters. What signal do you think that sends, or is he attempting to send?
I mean, he needs to be careful that he's going to poison his own argument. I mean, he's not exactly, I think, come onto the national scene in Ottawa and charmed a lot of people with his approach to things. But look, the F-35 program that Canada has bought into is not going to go away. I can understand why. There's some appetite for the Gripen aircraft. It's a very impressive piece of kit. The question is, and you've had people on your show, and I think it'll be a conversation for a while longer yet, is whether or not the $81 billion that was set aside in this federal budget, of which about a quarter is going to go to retention, recruitment, and salary increases, so $60 billion left, whether or not there's margin in there in terms of re-equipping the Canadian forces that might include a second aircraft, a second platform. We are the only country, I believe, in the G7 that doesn't have a secondary platform. So there's an argument for the Gripen. It's said to be cheaper. It's said to be better in the north. It's it diversifies our capacity. But the question is that diversified capacity in our best interest? Does it diminish our ability? Are we still on board for the 88 planes? What does it mean for supply chains? What does it mean for all of the needs that we have for the Canadian forces? The government will make a decision about the F-35 and the supplemental money they put in this budget and whether or not to get a second aircraft. But I think it should be done entirely within the rubric of what is in Canada's best defense interest, number one. Number two, can there be some economic benefits associated with that? And then three, interoperability with the United States should be the third interest in that. Now, those things kind of do combine a bit. But Minister Jolie there saying that her number one concern is jobs. It's not the number one concern. The number one concern is national security, national defense. From that, you hope that jobs flow, but the number one concern should be national defense.
What I garner, Peter, though, from what the ambassador said was that there would be a consequence if the federal government does not proceed with the F-35s. And at the same time, he's saying, oh, you're a sovereign country. I understand the review's going on. But he tied it explicitly to trade talks. What do you make of that?
Well, first off, I mean, we have to recognize that the F-35 program is a troubled program. And the Auditor General flagged the fact that costs have risen over 50%. We're now at $9 billion more for the initial aircraft than we were supposed to pay. It is a very troubled program. And so why would the ambassador flag this in such a public way? And it's because what we've seen from Mr. Carney since he became prime minister is concession after concession on the digital services tax. The Americans pushed back on that. And now these web giants that make tens of billions of dollars of profit in Canada don't pay the digital services tax, which was long overdue. At the end of June, the call from the Donald Trump administration was for Canada to substantially increase its military expenditures, basically said to Canada, jump. And Mr. Carney's reply was, how high? And now we're seeing a budget where many services are being cut for regular families. And at the same time, as James Moore has pointed out, $60 billion is going into military procurement. So we have a troubled program on the one hand. On the other hand, we see a government that has conceded time after time after time to the Americans. And that's why you have the U.S. ambassador in an unprecedented way, pushing again to force the government to concede yet again. I hope they do not. And the NDP has been very clear. We think the F-35 purchase should be canceled, that we should not be looking to throw more money into a program that has been experienced so many delays and so many cost overruns. And the reality is we don't have the same presence in the House of Commons, but we will certainly be speaking out to say this doesn't make sense to have more military integration with the American administration at a time when Donald Trump has mused openly about annexing Canada.
And I get all of that, Marco. The fascinating part is like the one and only time I've interviewed the ambassador, you know, he raised the specter of NORAD and the F-35s very quickly, and sort of like, well, there'd have to be a discussion about NORAD. So even though like public sentiment, I think, would back what Peter is saying in a desire to move away from any kind of dependence on the United States, like, the fact of the matter is interoperability is key to continental defense at this point, which I imagine is a very challenging thing to balance with the current state of politics.
Yes, and it is fascinating, and I think what you're hearing from the ambassador reflects a degree of frustration from the White House and the Trump administration, perhaps about the lack of pace and progress when it comes to our negotiations. I think on our side of the border, you know, we too are equally frustrated about the lack of progress. And we can talk about the merits of the F-35 versus the Gripen, and I think James, quite accurately laid out some of the criteria, including UVASHI, around interoperability and best bang for buck. And look, the reality is that whichever way this plays out, Canada and the United States will continue to be joined by geography and mutual shared interest when it comes to protecting our skies. Because of those factors, and also because we are long-standing allies. That does not preclude us from continuing to explore other opportunities when it comes to our relationships in the defense space. One of the things that the Prime Minister did last spring was negotiate a Canada-EU security and defense partnership, and we're now starting to see the practical benefits of that in the form of other agreements, including most recently this week, the visit by the Swedes, where you're going to start to see, I think, some real tangible benefits in that space. But just to bring all of this to full circle, around the frustration and the links between the defense file and the trade file, look, what the Prime Minister has said is true. We're ready to get back to the table. You know, the chairs are there. We're ready to pull in. But, you know, the Americans also have to step up. And I think we want to get back there and find ways in which we can resolve some of the ongoing and lingering issues when it comes to tariffs so that we can both economically prosper going forward.
Okay, I'll leave it there. The ambassador did not sound overly optimistic about those talks restarting, but he seemed to say that there might be a path at some point to it. So I'll leave our conversation there. Thank you, all three of you. Really appreciate you making the time. Marco Medicino, James Moore, and Peter Julian, our front bench on this Thursday.